And the Black Lives Matter movement is helping to shine a spotlight on these issues and make sure that people are not just angry today, but they're angry tomorrow, and they're angry next week, and they're angry a month from now, and angry and remaining angry until we achieve reform.
I think it'd be helpful if people treated black people the way they would treat white people, right? Which sounds quippish, but I mean to say, part of what we require is real moral imagination, the real effort, the real genuine effort to try to see in each other something like a person, like a genuine, real person.
Let me say about the Middle East, you may be sick and tired of the Middle East, but the Middle East is not sick and tired of you.
And I feel extremely sorry for my colleagues in the French security service for not having prevented the recent attacks in France. But the problem has really been that the Belgian security service is very poor. In fact, not to put too fine a point on it, they're useless.
This is an amazing insight. In other words, the fact that she finds that the indifference that she feels is actually sexually thrilling to her.
But I think that's true of moralists. I think that I think that indifference is a moralist's vacation spot.
Okay.
Well said.
Hamilton, from the moment it hit its first audience at the public, was hitting a group of people who didn't know how desperate they were to feel patriotic again. And that's the vibe that one feels from the audience every night now at the Rogers.
Let me give my phone number. Now, he had like 12 phones in his house, none of which he ever answered. He said, if you're calling me, just to leave a message, say tuna fish 1, okay? If you want me to reply, tuna fish 2. If it's urgent, tuna fish 3. He said, and if it's like end of the world, tuna fish 4. I said, listen, I hope, but he said, but never use tuna fish 4.
I am a child of the Cold War, where each day we lived with a dark nuclear cloud hanging over our heads, threatening no less than the end of civilization, where we are sleepwalking towards an existential catastrophe.
Imagine in a few years' time we have a domestic robot. One day we're late home from work, we call up the robot and say, can you make dinner for the kids? I'm not going to be home until 8 o'clock. And the robot goes to the fridge and there's nothing there. And then it sees the cat. And it says, well, I could go down to the supermarket and do the shopping and come back and do the cooking, but I can't really leave the house because the kids are too small to be left by themselves. And so I'll just cook the cat for dinner.
My research over the last quarter century leads me to believe our cancer screening efforts are creating more problems than they solve. Doctors aren't sure which things will or will not matter, so we intervene on all of them. And that can cause real problems: medication side effects, surgical complications, even death.
Humans versus computers and chess is profoundly uninteresting now. The humans are going to get crushed. It's so bad that they asked a grandmaster a little while back how he would prepare for a match against a computer. And he said, I'd bring a hammer.
Henry Kissinger and I, we will boil down 5,000 years of Chinese history into a few pithy sound bites. We will enable you to impress your neighbors.
The NCAA is one of the worst organizations in the United States. It restricts the rights and the abilities of players. That the NCAA was actually a cartel that existed to depress the wages of the labor force. The labor force are the players. They get nothing. Men's basketball and college football players should be paid.
I think Joe's plan would be okay if it weren't 1, bad for universities, 2, bad for sports, and 3, bad for the athletes, right? Other than that, it's fine.
The threats to this country are on the rise. Be sure that you will have strong feelings. Be sure that you will either be terrified or angry by the conversation. And you will be asked to be involved. You will be asked to voice your opinions and voice your views, because we don't tend to do that when there's a threat. We tend to do it only after the event.
This past week, the Watson system had been trained by Memorial Sloan Kettering and the top oncologists in the world. And a research institution in Japan announced that a patient that had been diagnosed with leukemia that was being treated was about to pass. And the physician consulted the Watson genomic oncology advisor that had been trained at Sloan Kettering. And Watson declared on its own that that was not what was wrong with this patient. That was not the proper treatment. The doctor changed the treatment, and that patient now is alive and well.
There's a prince, and his name is Charles. I could be a prince. And I just start to watch every single thing that he does. It all became theater to me. Life became theater. And that all I had to do to become someone was to behave like someone.
There's a whole side of the universe that we've never seen before. It's objects and phenomena that aren't made from matter like you and me. They're made from warped space and warped time. We want to learn about that. So for the first time now in human history, we have the ability to explore the warped side of the universe, explore black holes.
What is the biggest policy mistake each of you individuals have made over your careers?
See, it takes a lot of thought to come up with it. Another question?
I hope that we don't all have to believe that the contemporary artists will be entrusted to save the old masters in some way. That the notion that anything can only be interesting if it's seen through the lens of this moment of contemporary production, I hope we don't get there.
Putin is a bad guy. He's also a very smart guy. The combination is awful. People think, we're going to supply the Ukrainians with more arms. We're going to put a battalion into the Baltic states. That isn't going to do it. We have to step back and realize that even though Russia is dangerous in these areas, we also have common interests with Russia.
These kinds of technologies over time could open the door to all kinds of possibilities for all the rest of us as well. Imagine a future where we can learn very complex tasks or languages in a flash. A future where we might be able to connect with each other in completely and radically new ways.
Where maybe 1% of the population of this country has celiac disease, but something like 25% of people these days are on a gluten-free diet.
That great New Yorker cartoon, it's just been a week that I've given up gluten, but I'm already more annoying.
Yeah. And so the evidence that says artificial sweeteners cause cancer is absolutely wrong. In fact, what we proved over time and what we learned is that rats get cancer. If you give rats anything, they get cancer. If you give them vitamin C in huge amounts, they get cancer.
I'm all for abandoning the word feminist because I don't know what it means. I don't know why it's necessary. But I think that we spend a little bit too much time thinking about labels and not really thinking about what's really going on and where do our daughters have to go to continue to progress.
But the last thing we couldn't do was think about altering genes in situ in human cells. And then came CRISPR-Cas9. In 2013, CRISPR-Cas9 was adapted to use in human cells and allows the cutting of DNA at any particular chosen place inside a cell without altering the cell.
I represent Jane, I think, as you know, one of the most diverse districts in the country. It's still a slight majority African American. But they're African American, Caribbean Americans, Latinos, South Asians, the Orthodox Jewish community, Bangladeshi Americans, Turkish Americans, Italian Americans. In fact, I represent more Russian-speaking Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union than any other member of Congress in the country. I mean, who knew? Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, what a great country.
So what I'm saying is, you're right. This does not make sense. Something is taking hold here, and I think all of us have got to rethink, and I know Hakeem and I, who've been in the wars in Congress, it works when you get a majority, and a majority should be that in the middle. The right and the left working together, setting aside differences, seeing how we can go forward incrementally to ultimately get where we want to go.
When's the last time we saw that?
Exactly.
So you're going to have a stalwart representative of the progressive left, Andrew Stern, and a libertarian like me, because we both think that a universal basic income is the way to go.
I always open new books at Barnes & Nobles. I look at the first page, and the first thing that comes to mind is, this is nothing like Proust. Nobody can actually measure up to the degree of excellence that Proust sort of encompasses.
We're at altitude of 1 kilometer descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane has started.
Signal to us, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.